The former Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Mohammed, joins me in Lagos City. Alhaji, thank you so much for coming on the program, and good to see you.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for having me.
In fact, I told myself, let's start on a very light hand, because I know that a lot of young people, at some point, were not happy with you for one reason. Remember when the Jollof war started between Ghana and Nigerian Jollof, and I think it was Quest that asked you that the question when he came to one of his shootings and his recordings. And he asked you, I said, Alhaji, Ghana Jollof and Nigerian Jollof. And he said, Senegal, you betrayed our country. What happened? In the voice of the young people, I'm re-echoing what they say.
That's interesting. You see, when you look at the origin of Jollof, it's actually from the word Wolof, and the Senegalese. And the people don't understand the origin of Jollof. Jollof rice was actually that food that was prepared for prisoners, because it was that food that was put in one plate, oil, salt, you know, and everything. So really, the origin of Jollof is Wolof. But I think later, it must be UN Tourism or somebody, you know, came out and Wikipedia, yes, the origin of, you know, Wolof, of Jollof is actually Wolof. Okay. We call it Chebuche in Wolof.
Well, I don't know whether you had the time for that to explain at that time, because a lot of young people were like, no, you're the man in charge of tourism and culture. You should have defended us as much as possible. But beyond that, what have you been up to since you left government?
Well, not too much mischief, I can assure you, Geoffrey. I was quite fortunate to be appointed as the special advisor to the Secretary General UN Tourism, which used to be United Nations World Tourism Organization. I held that appointment since July 2023. And that has kept me very busy globally. I've been at virtually every meeting of UN Tourism, and I've been writing position papers and advising the Secretary General, you know, of UN Tourism on tourism, especially in Africa. It's also kept me abreast of the creative industry, globally. So it has kept me very busy. And of course, on the sideline too, I've been running my own lobbyist firm, and I do a bit of lobbying, I do government relations, I do, you know, strategic communication, because in the last 20, 30 years, all I've been doing, I've either been in government or in opposition, and in both roles, I've been spokesperson, either for opposition or for government. So my job was cut out for me easily when I left office.
I can't wait to jump into this, your book, which is one of the major reasons why we're here. Yes. Headlines and sound bites, media moments that defined an administration. And it's been considered an insider chronicle of governance, because you were right there on those seats when those things that we're going to speak about within the time we have happened. But just before that, before we started the conversation, somebody was telling me he's one of the finest opposition voices we had when it was opposition. And now look at the state of the opposition. What do you think was the difference between then and now? It looks like opposition thrived under the PDP, but it's not thriving under the APC. Is that something you have looked at critically?
Well, I think it depends on the way you look at it. I was asked this same question a few days ago. That Nigerians were worried and concerned about this mass, defection to APC, and whether APC was not turning the country to one-party system. And my answer was, look, have you ever seen a football team that I would say is tired of scoring goals? Honestly, that's where I look at it. A political party is there to win as many supporters as possible. So why are you now holding them? Why are you now annoyed that they are getting as much?
Because the argument is that some of them are coerced, some of them has been threatened, some of them, all kinds of things have been said as a reason why they are defecting. It's not naturally voluntary. Is that something?
Geoffrey,
Geoffrey,
there's, people will talk. They will adduce reasons. But I know that in politics, you always want more people. You want more people to convert to your party. That's all I'm going to talk about.
We're going to come back to this issue that we just started off, but let's get straight to the book. The curiosity for me is, this is about the third book I know of that has been written about Muhammad Buhari. The first I remember is Working with Buhari, Reflection of a Special Advisor, Media and Publicity. That's Femi Adesina. Just before you, I can't remember whether yours was released first. I think yours was released first. We had Soldier to Statesman, Legacy of Muhammad Buhari. That's from Dr. Charles Omale. And then your book, Headlines and Soundbites, Media Moments That Defined an Administration. What is it about this avalanche of writing about the legacy of Buhari?
Thank you, Geoffrey. I think the more we all write, the better for history. The tragedy of Africans that we don't write enough. My own book is my own personal effort at documenting contemporary history from an insider's viewpoint. As the longest-serving Minister of Information and Culture in Nigeria's history, for 8 years, I was at the center of government communication, crisis management, national orientation, tourism, and culture. And I believe that I owe posterity a duty to chronicle and document how I was able to use media as a tool to shape narrative, to influence government policies, to explain government policies. And here it's not about postulations. I'm talking about being inside there, understanding how decisions were made, understanding how narratives were shaped, and how also misconception and misinformation overshadow the real facts. This is what this book is all about.
One of those spots that defined that administration of which you were at the forefront is still a very controversial defining moment in our history, the EndSARS, which I'm sure you captured in this book, which had to do with whether or not, because when the panel came up with their reports, I remember vividly all kinds of controversy emanated. I think I was watching you one time when you were saying it's riddled with inconsistencies and all of that. I think the panel had reported some deaths that were occasioned by that, shooting that happened at the toll gate. The initial problem was who gave the order for them to come. There was a back and forth as to who gave the order. Eventually, they were invited. And then whether or not their bullets were the ones that killed people or it was a stampede. What is your current position as to what happened then? Because it's difficult to believe nobody was killed at the Lekki toll gate. But the government has constantly maintained that that is their position. What is your position today, looking back at 2020?
Geoffrey, 5 years later, my position has not changed. Because even before the soldiers were drafted, I was in touch with the Chief of Defense Staff. I was in touch with the hierarchy of the military, because we were monitoring this development. At no point did the government ever say that lives were not lost during EndSARS. We lost several lives, including soldiers, including policemen, but nobody was killed at the toll gate.
But the panel has said people were killed. Amnesty International said 12 people. But so the panel that was set up, people were killed.
Geoffrey.
But the government is saying people were not killed.
Geoffrey, it's very simple logic, Geoffrey. If your ward, either your son or your daughter goes to the toll gate, does not come back, and is killed, won't you make representation to government? Or 5 years after, nobody has come out to say, my son or my daughter or my ward went to the toll gate, he didn't come back.
So what do you make of the panel that was specifically set up by the Lagos state government who alluded to that fact?
Geoffrey,
and compensations were paid to people who casualty reported and all of that. We have all these documents.
Geoffrey,
it's public information.
I am not part of Lagos state government. Geoffrey, I did not know how the panel arrived at their conclusion. Geoffrey, I was in the room where the shots were taken. And I knew that the soldiers went to the toll gate with blank shots, blank bullets. We can go over this again and again, but what I know is what I know. And I remember I was in France, it was in Paris, when the Lagos State, the panel came out with these findings. And then I said, no, this cannot be, it's riddled with a lot of inconsistencies. Because I was in a vantage position monitoring these issues. Because unknown to many people, even as Minister of Information and Culture, I used to meet, even when there was no problem, meet regularly with the defense, architecture of the country, where we met regularly to review things. And with the media, you recall that once every month, title editors would meet at the NIA. At the NIA in Abuja, with the military, Minister of Defense, Minister of Police Affairs, myself, Garba and Femi Adesina, and we would discuss sensitive security issues, but not for reporting, just to give the media a good background and context.
Looking back, does the government regret its decision to send soldiers, whether with blank bullet, live bullet, any form of bullet, unarmed young people who were peaceful in their protest, at least at that Lekki toll gate? Yes, there were violence in other parts. Does the government regret that decision that has become like a black spot in the administration under which you serve?
You see, the EndSARS started, I correctly said, peacefully. At the point in time, it was hijacked by hoodlums. That was when the government said, no, we have to send soldiers to stop this from, getting out of hands. So the government took the right decision because hoodlums had hijacked it at that time.
Let's talk about Twitter, which you wrote in this book as well. People have said that the reason why Twitter was banned is to the fact that it touched the fragile ego of the political class, the president himself. But I listened to you, said no, that there has been conversations prior to that that led to the eventual, banning of Twitter. But one of the things that was said as a push, you were saying that they were supposed to regularize a few things, such as maybe opening office in Nigeria and all of that. So maybe you put the facts out today on behalf of Nigerians to say, why exactly was Twitter banned? And what were the conditions for Twitter to be restored? And have those conditions been met?
You see, I think it must be 2017 when I started the campaign against fake news and disinformation. I think it was 2017, and it was in Plateau State when I converted a National Council on Information meeting to address this issue of fake news and hate speeches, because I knew the dimension it was taking. I followed that up by visit to media houses to assist us in combating the dangers of fake news, hate speeches, and disinformation. After which, we had cause to invite several of these,
microblog site,
blog, blogs, to please plead with them that there should be self-regulation. That we were not even thinking of, a law to stifle the media, but we were concerned that an unregulated social media was dangerous to society. So along the line, we invited many of these social media platforms. Again, we also found out that around that same time, certain platforms became the platform of choice for those that wanted to destroy our stability and our unity. And we want them. As a matter of fact, when we took the decision to suspend the operations of Twitter, the president, God bless his soul, asked me only one question: do I have the capacity to do so? And I said, I discussed with my colleague, the Minister of Communication and Data Economy. But the sole purpose why we suspended the operation of Twitter was because it was becoming reckless. And when we even warned them.
Reckless, is that your definition of dissenting voice?
No.
Because some people will argue, Alhaji, my apologies, that it was the strength of the social media that supported the bringing on board of the All Progressives Congress. Now it has helped to bring the government on board, and now the government is cracking down on dissenting voice, which is the only avenue to which they'll be able to. Yes, there are extremes. We will not debate that.
You see, honestly, we are more worried about those extremes. You see, it is because there's a country called Nigeria. That is where there's media. That's where there's all kinds of freedom. You must not push that to the extent that you are going to set one part of the country against the other. I don't know whether you watched the video that was played in court during the trial of, Nnamdi Kanu. And saw how the social media was used to direct people to attack certain institutions, to destroy and build and bring down certain infrastructure. You see, it got to a stage that social media was becoming dangerous to everybody. You see, unlike the television, radio, or newspaper, where you had gatekeepers, there were no gatekeepers.
So, Alhaji, would you say that after the ban, after the president's tweet was deleted, that Twitter, for instance, which is now X, had actually done what the government set out for it to do? Because I have a few more questions before we're totally running out of time.
You see, you go to this book, you see all the correspondence between us and Twitter, the agreements that were signed between us and Twitter, that prior to that time, Twitter was not even registered in Nigeria to do business, talking of paying taxes. And I think you can find out exactly now from from both NCC and the other parastatals that Twitter, the agreement they signed with us, which is contained in this book, is evidence that yes, we did the right thing.
Alhaji, before I let you go, let's talk about Muhammad Buhari. I think it would be disservice if you don't talk about him. But what comes to mind is a lot of people have written about him, including yourself. From the writings we have seen and read, it looks like he was a great person. But was he a great president? And what would be your assessment of a great president?
Geoffrey, if you look at chapter 1 of my book, which is Muhammad Buhari, friend, mentor, and leader, I think it describes from my own perspective who Muhammad Buhari is.
And what would that be? And what would that be? For the people who haven't read your book, who is Muhammad Buhari to you? And my question actually, the second part of my question is, a lot of people have the idea of what Muhammad Buhari is as a leader, because they are not his family member, they didn't serve with him, his policies that he led as a government, 3 promises he made, cardinally to fight corruption. The jury is out on that. We've seen what's been happening with, some of your colleagues now, although alleged. The issue of security, yes, some were quelled at the very beginning, but has metastasized to the point where, look at what is playing out today. And then to talk about the economy, this government says if they didn't take the aggressive decision they took to take out the wage bill and optimize, would have tanked. So that's why I'm asking, was he a great president, besides being a great person, which is personal?
You see, the purpose of this book is precisely to set the record straight. It is to correct misconception. And it's to highlight those great things that were achieved by the president during his tenure. How many Nigerians remember today that President Muhammad Buhari saved Nigeria from losing $9.6 billion, which the P&ID fraudulently obtained from arbitration?
I remember that case.
Thank you. How many Nigerians remember today how that administration handled the COVID-19 pandemic? And it's on record that we were the 3rd best country in handling the pandemic. When the pandemic started, we thought that people would just die like flies on the streets. How many people remember today that the iconic National Theatre was disused until he came in, and luckily the bankers committee came in too, and today we have this edifice there. How many people remember that under Muhammad Buhari, an agreement was signed to return the largest number of stolen artifacts in the world, 1,130 Benin bronzes? How many Nigerians, remember today that prior to Muhammad Buhari coming to power in 2015, 20 local governments in the Northeast were under the effective occupation of Boko Haram. Now, you see, and that is why, for me, it's important to document these things.
All right. Alhaji, I wish we had more time to explore, but I think you've said what you have to say. So it's a book titled Headlines and Soundbites, Media Moments That Defined an Administration, literally an insider chronicle of the Muhammad Buhari administration and the role you played in managing narratives and communication. But almost thank you. And we'll definitely be touching base with you despite all the busy schedule you have. But we thank you for coming on the program, sir. We appreciate it.
Jeffrey, thank you for having me.
Thank you. You're welcome.